which has the backing of Iran and Russia, the Syrian army supported by Iran and Russia. So President Assad has powerful friends, and they're stepping up in his hour of crisis. Iran is sending militias to support Assad's army. Yesterday, they sent some 300 fighters via Iraq. Meanwhile, Russia is giving aerial support. Russian planes carried out airstrikes to neutralize the rebels. At least 25 people were killed in these Russian airstrikes. The Syrian Air Force was part of this operation. Together, they tried to push back the rebels. And as always, civilians are bearing the brunt of war.
صار قصف جراء استهداف مدينة إدلب 1/12/2024.
في حدا تحت؟
ليكا المرة ليكا وين؟ شهيد 1/12/2024 استهداف الأحياء داخل مدينة إدلب.
The Iranian foreign minister has visited Damascus. He said the trip was supposed to send a message to demonstrate Tehran's firm support to Assad. Iran says its military advisors are in Damascus. They will remain there until the threat to the Assad regime is neutralized. And this is not a new deployment. Iran has been supporting Assad since the civil war began in 2011. As part of this support, they've stationed a team of advisors in Damascus. Moscow, too, has reiterated its support to the Assad regime.
Of course, we continue to support Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. We continue our contacts on the relevant levels. We analyze the situation in Syria. Russia's position will be formed in regard of what is needed for the stabilization of situation.
These words would be welcome in Damascus because President Assad faces a significant challenge and his political rivals are also ramping up attacks.
I assure you that we will continue this time, and we won't stop fighting until one of two things happens. Either this regime commits to the entire political process to implement the UN Security Council Resolution 2254 until we reach a political transition.
Syria says it has neutralized 1,000 rebels in the last week. But the fact is that this latest offensive has exposed Assad's weaknesses. His military appears weak and underprepared. He has lost control of a strategically significant city. He must contain, if not completely stop the rebels if he has to survive. And for that, he will need help from his allies, Moscow and Tehran. So the forgotten civil war has been reignited. What does it mean for the world? In this case, we don't have to guess. We simply have to look at the last decade because the concerns and the impacts remain the same. Number one is refugees. Syria is the largest refugee crisis in the world. Since the year 2011, more than 14 million people have fled their homes. 14 million. Fresh fighting means more refugees. Concern number two. Syria is a tinderbox of foreign forces. Look at all the countries deployed there. You've got the Russian forces, you've got Iranian militia, you've got Hezbollah fighters, around 900 American soldiers, dozens of Turkish troops, and in the skies, Israeli fighter jets. All these powers are involved in Syria. They have their own strategic goals there. Russia and Iran are fighting for President Assad. They support him. Turkey is backing the rebels, and the US is targeting extremist groups. So different and opposing goals, which make Syria a tinderbox. And finally, concern number three, a possible resurgence of the Islamic State or ISIS. You may remember what happened in the last decade. The Syrian Civil War led to instability and chaos. ISIS used that chaos to expand its grip. They set up a caliphate across Syria and Iraq. At one point, ISIS controlled 1/3 of Syrian territory. It became their own kingdom of terror. They plotted attacks from there, radicalized people on the internet, and retreated to safety when attacked. It took a massive multi-nation coalition to defeat the ISIS. But if the fighting escalates again, who knows? ISIS may rise from the ashes. These are the three main concerns for the global community: another refugee crisis, a proxy war, and a resurgent ISIS. Now, you can add some of the usual West Asian variables to this, like rising oil prices and more military deployments. Simply put, this is a conflict you should care about. It has global financial and security implications. Now let's meet the main players. First is Turkey. When the anti-Assad protests first broke out in 2011, Ankara supported it. It supported the protesters. President Erdogan of Turkey wanted to topple Bashar al-Assad. He hosted Syrian opposition leaders. He also welcomed 3.6 million Syrian refugees. But Assad was not Erdogan's only enemy in Syria. The country is also home to Kurdish political and military groups. Erdogan considers them to be terrorists. He has launched cross-border attacks on these Kurdish groups. So Turkey's position is quite clear. They don't like Assad and they don't like the Kurds. So they're backing the rebels. The same rebels who just took control of Aleppo. Erdogan has not said anything about this operation, but chances are he knew about it. The rebels would not take such a big step without his approval. Which brings us to the second player, Russia. Moscow is an ally of the Assad regime. When the war broke out, they began sending weapons and advisors. Then in 2015, Russia intervened directly. They launched airstrikes on rebel positions, which made Assad's job easier. And what did Putin gain from this intervention, this operation? A major foothold in West Asia. But the latest tensions will worry him. Russian media is talking about a deep conspiracy. They believe that Ukraine, Turkey, France, and the US and Israel plotted this escalation in Syria. Why? To turn Russia's attention away from Ukraine. Well, the logic checks out, but there is absolutely no proof. And speaking of attention, the same can be said of Assad's other ally, Iran. Until 2015, Tehran kept Assad's regime afloat. Their proxy, Hezbollah, fought for Assad's army. Iran also recruited Shias from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And all these fighters were key to Assad's success. They brought experience and weapons into his army. Just one problem, though. Iran's focus is elsewhere right now. Hezbollah fighters returned when Israel attacked Lebanon. And Iran pulled back its militia as tensions rose. So Assad's army lost its backbone. The air support from Russia was gone, and the ground support from Iran was much weaker. So the rebels decided to strike. Today, the foreign ministers of Turkey and Iran met in Ankara. Their differences were pretty clear. Iran blamed Israel and the US for last week's escalation. Turkey said, don't blame foreign interference.
According to the information we obtained, the terrorist organizations operating in Syria are in close relation and coordination with America and the Zionist regime. These groups have been encouraged to create an environment of insecurity in Syria with the aim of distracting from the Zionist regime's crimes in Palestine.